A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am your MOC Purnesh Paliwala from Team Nikhil Khatri and Grover Solutions, and we are here at the fourth day of AIOC 79th virtual conference. Welcome to Hall Elder, and to begin with the first session, that is panel discussion, may I please invite Dr. Sahana Sood to take over.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on a Saturday morning. And as we all know, the name of the IC is Perfect Guide to Corneal Imaging. We'll be discussing OBSCAN, Pentacam, ASOCT, and specular microscopy. A short introduction of the panel. I'm Dr. Shana. I'm a phaco-refractive cornea surgeon at Port Blair. Dr. Sanjana is also a phaco-refractive cornea surgeon at Bangalore, and Dr. Aparna Nayak is a phaco-refractive cornea surgeon at Udupi. Our fourth panelist could not join us due to an emergency, so I will be taking up that topic as well. So let's begin. So what are the scans we're going to cover? Corneal topography, ASOCT, and specular microscopy. This instruction course is for residents, general ophthalmologists, first-year fellows, as we'll be covering basics and quite a bit of spotters too. So let's start then. I would be taking OBSCAN first. So corneal topography, we'll be covering OBSCAN and Pentacam. Let's revise with the 5 most important concepts for both topographies. The first concept is what is with the rule and what is against the rule, astigmatism. So as we all know, cornea is not a hemisphere, it's a prolate structure. This means one axis is steeper and one axis is the flatter axis. The next concept which I want to discuss is what is best fixed.
Share your screen.
Sorry?
Share your screen.
Ma'am, you aren't sharing your screen as of now.
Am I not sharing screen?
No, you need to start sharing the screen again.
Okay. Has it started now?
No, doctor, not yet.
Sharing here for me. Share screen. Yeah. Can you allow it? I don't know.
Manojji, controls, please.
Yes, allow. Please just open your presentation and.
See, is it there now?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's coming now.
Okay, so should I start all over?
Yes, doctor, works.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So all over again?
Yes, doctor, as you like it.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday morning for our instruction course, that is Perfect Guide to Corneal Imaging. It will be taken by 3 panelists, that is me, myself, Dr. Shana Sood, Dr. Sanjana Vatsa, and Dr. Aparna Nayak. A brief introduction, I'm Dr. Shana and I'm a phaco-refractive and cornea surgeon at Port Blair. Dr. Sanjana is also a phaco-refractive cornea surgeon at Bangalore, and Dr. Aparna Nayak is a phaco-refractive cornea surgeon at Udupi. Our 4th panelist could not join us due to an emergency, so I'll be taking that topic. What are the scans we're going to cover? Corneal topography is a must-know for general ophthalmologists, for residents, and also for first-year fellows. ASOCT and specular microscopy. So let's begin with the first one, that is OBSCAN. Beginning with corneal topography, there are 5 important concepts for everyone that is a must-know. We'll be covering these important concepts one by one. The first concept is with rule and against rule, astigmatism. As we all know, cornea is not a hemisphere, it's a prolate structure. That means one axis is a steeper axis and one axis is a flatter axis. So in corneal topography, the steeper axes are seen as warm colors and the flatter axes are seen as cool colors. By warm colors, I mean yellow, red, orange, and by cooler colors, I mean green, blue. So when you see a steep axis at 90 degrees plus minus 15 to 20 degrees, that is with the rule astigmatism. When you see a steeper axis at 180 degrees plus minus 15 to 20 degrees, that is against the rule astigmatism. Let's go with the next concept. The next concept which you need to know in topography is what is best fixed sphere. So like we suggested that the cornea is not a regular hemispherical structure. In the central area, it's a little more steep, and in the periphery, it flattens out a little. So what is best fixed sphere? Assuming this is the cornea curvature, the best fixed sphere that fits into it is the topographical best fixed sphere. Elevations from that sphere give us positive values and depressions give us negative values. So this best fixed sphere is different for the anterior float and it is different for the posterior curvature. So different for the anterior curvature of the cornea and different for the posterior curvature of the cornea. The third concept which we're going to cover is what are the zones in the cornea. The zones in the cornea seen topographically are the 3 mm, 5 mm, 7 mm, 9 mm and 12 mm zones. Most of the pathologies take place in the 3 mm, 5 mm and the 7 mm zones. So these are important zones topographically. And we'll be seeing irregularities in these zones and how they're important as flags in keratoconus. The fourth concept is what is bow tie. So if you flash a light in a dark room on a prolate structure, that is a structure which has a steeper axis and a flatter axis, for example, this base wall, what you would notice is that light distributes itself in a bow tie fashion. That means like the men wear those bow ties, no? That kind of a bow tie fashion. So this bow tie is very important in topography as it gives us typical patterns for a normal cornea and for a pathological cornea. Types of bow tie that are seen are the symmetric bow tie and asymmetric bow tie. The symmetric bow tie is where the upper lobe and the lower lobe both are equally in size and equal in appearance. An asymmetric bow tie is where the inferior part is larger or steeper, is as seen in the second image, that is asymmetric bow tie with inferior steepening, and the one next to it is asymmetric bow tie with superior steepening. So concept number 5, what is skew in radial axis? As you can see here, there's a symmetric bow tie pattern formed by the yellow colored lobes on the curvature map. This bow tie is asymmetric as the size of the lobes differ a little bit. The radial axis of the lobes form an angle here. If this angle is more than 22 degrees, it is known as skew in radial axis. In this case, there is only an asymmetric bow tie, but no skew in radial axis. But in the images that I've put on the right side, on the extreme right, you can see an asymmetric bow tie with a skew in radial axis. Moving on to the corneal topography, number 1 that we're going to discuss is OBSCAN. Principle, most of it is theory. It uses 2 mechanisms, that is the slit scan, where it does 40 scans of 240 points each, and the Placitos discs, which creates mires on the surface to pick up topographical values. So what does an OBSCAN look like? To study an OBSCAN, we're going to divide it into 3 parts. The part 1, like I've given here, we're going to study the anterior float, the central values, and the posterior float. Part 2 is our keratometric map, and part 3 is our pachymetry map. So let's move on with interpretation of part 1 first. The most common indication for OBSCAN or corneal topography is keratoconus. And what are the important values to look at are these values that I've just consolidated in one slide. So if you want, you can take the screenshot or you can just click a picture. We'll go by these values one by one. So let's start with the first one. So values in part 1 is when we see the floats and we see the central values, what do we have to see? I have written here posterior BFS, that is the posterior best fixed sphere. So what is the posterior best fixed sphere? It is the posterior curvature of the cornea and the best fixed sphere. What are the values that you get? I've indicated it in a red circle in the slide. So the posterior best fixed sphere for a normal patient, it should be less than 52 diopters. For a keratoconus suspect, it is 52 to 55, and abnormal definite ectasia values is more than 55 diopters. The difference that is the most elevated point to the best fixed sphere, again, this is indicated by a green oval inside the slide in the image of the scan. A normal value is less than 0.04. Suspect for keratoconus is 0.04 to 0.05, and abnormal is more than 0.05. Next comes the ratio of the anterior BFS to the posterior BFS. This ratio is not given as such in OBSCANs. As you can see, these 2 white ovals that are marked in the scan, the first one that is to your left is your anterior BFS and to your right is your posterior BFS. So you have to sit and numerically calculate the value. The normal value is less than 1.21. A suspect is 1.21 to 1.27 and abnormal is more than 1.27. Moving on, let's start interpreting the central values. Like I said, the centrally placed highest point is very important, because in keratoconus, the displacement of the ectatic area is inferior or inferotemporal. So this centrally placed highest point is here. So this looks like a normal scan. When the centrally placed highest point is inferiorly in the 3 to 5 mm zone, that is a marker for keratoconus. Similarly, irregularities less than 1.5 in 3 mm zone and less than 2 diopter in 5 mm zone is normal. However, irregularity more than 1.5 diopters in 3 mm zone and more than 2 diopters in 5 mm zone is abnormal ectasia. So what we have to see here is where is the highest point, where is the warmest color. If the warmest color is in the center, it's usually normal, provided the K values and the rest of the thing is normal. Typically in keratoconus, the displacement of the highest area will be in the 5 mm zone, 3 to 5 mm zone, inferior temporally. Values in part 2, what do we look for? So part 2 is our keratometric map. So the K values that we have to see less than 47.2 diopters is normal. 47.2 to 48.7 is a suspect, and more than 48.7 diopters is a definite ectasia. The next we have to see is an irregularity profile. Less than 3 diopters difference in superior and inferior values in 3 mm zone is normal. However, if there's a more than 3 diopter difference in K values in central 3 mm zone, superior and inferiorly, it is abnormal. So for example, let's calculate it for this map. As you can see in the 3 mm zone in the first circle, the superior value that is circled in black is 45 diopter and the inferior value is 44.7. So if we take a difference of this, we get 0.3, that is 45 minus 44.7, which is less than 3 diopters. So this is a normal profile. This is not an irregular profile. Next, we move on to the topographical pattern. Symmetric bow tie is a normal pattern. However, asymmetric bow tie with skew and radial axis is an abnormal pattern. The next important values are K mean power in the map should be more than 46 diopters for keratoconus, or total mean power should be more than 45 diopters. The scans that I'm showing here, this one right here is a normal pattern, as K values are all below 47.2, and we've discussed the bow tie pattern. Values in part 3, that is pachymetry. Pachymetry, what do we have to see? The thinnest point more than 470 microns is normal. If it is less than 470 microns and outside the 5 mm zone, then it is abnormal. The difference between any one pachy in 7 mm zone and the thinnest pachy less than 90 microns is normal. 90 to 100 is suspect, and more than 100 micron is abnormal ectasia. Also, the difference between pachy at 7 mm and central reading should be calculated, and less than 20 microns is typical for abnormal ectasia. Also, thinnest point should be more than 30 microns thinner than the central reading. So these are all values that you have to sit and calculate in an OB scan. And to definitely diagnose as keratoconus, you have to look at all the floats and all the values. It's not just one value. Let's start interpreting. So not all spotters are pathologies. Let's see a normal OB scan first. You can see the anterior float, posterior float. The values are given over there, the keratometry map and the pachymetry map. The anterior float, posterior float, BFS values are within normal limits. Keratometry map shows symmetric bow tie with no inferior steepening. Pachymetry map shows normal values. Irregularity in the 3 mm and 5 mm zone are as discussed within normal limits. So this is more or less a normal OB scan. Moving on, let's come to the most common spotter, that is keratoconus. Let's see the anterior float, posterior float. You can see warm colors indicating elevations, increased irregularity in the 3 mm and 5 mm zone. The irregularity in 3 mm zone is 4.2 diopters, that is more than 1.5. In 5 mm zone is 3.9 diopters, that is more than 2.5. Also, pachymetry map shows thinning, and if you see the keratometric map, the values go down more than 49.3. Yeah, so all of these together, when put together, give us the diagnosis of keratoconus. The next important OB scan is pellucid marginal degeneration. On pellucid marginal degeneration, you typically see the bell sign, which is seen over here. Inferiorly, there is elevation. It also gives the typical crab claw or kissing pigeon sign seen in keratometry. And against the rule, astigmatism differentiates it from keratoconus, which is with the rule astigmatism. More about the details of what is Bell's sign in PMD, it is seen in the pachymetry map, thinning of the inferior cornea, and it gives a typical appearance of a bell and its gong as seen on the right side. The reference is JP Digital Book of Corneal Topography and Sinjap's Book of Corneal Topography. The next important quarter is post-myopic ablation. As you can see, there's flattening or blue areas that are noticed, cool areas on the anterior map. Keratometry map shows decreased K values corresponding to flattening on the elevation map. Pachymetry map shows thinning corresponding to low K values and flattening on the map. So this is a post-myopic ablation. This is a refractive patient that underwent PRK for myopia. Thank you, and we'll be moving on to the next topic, Dr. Sanjana for Pentacam.
Yeah, thank you, Shana. I will start sharing my screen. I think you have to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Just a minute. I'm not getting the option of desktop to access it.
Hello, Dr.
Yeah.
Sunita.
Doctor, what is the issue?
So my presentation is on the desktop, and I'm not able to access the desktop to share that.
Okay, all you need to do is first open your presentation, minimize this window, open your presentation, and then take the option of screen share. So it will give the access properly.
Is it seen now?
We can see.
Yeah, doctor, we are able to see the presentation. I request you to please turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and let's begin with the slide share. You're still on unmute, and that is the reason we are not able to hear you. Yes. Ma'am, I think you need to come a bit closer to the mic so that the voice is clear.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Good morning, everybody. And first of all, I would like to thank AOS for giving us this opportunity. So without much of a delay, I would like to start off with my presentation for today, which is the interpretation of Pentacam. So I'm Dr. Sanjana. I'm working as a cornea refractive consultant at Dr. Agarwal's Eye Hospital, Bangalore. Now, to start with the Pentacam interpretation, so firstly, we all know that Pentacam uses a rotating Scheimpflug camera, and it has a light source of UV-free blue light, which emitting diode, and it captures about 50 images of the anterior segment in 2 seconds, and takes into consideration about 138,000 elevation points from the front and the back of cornea, and takes the entire image from limbus to limbus, including the center of the pupil. Now, when we look at the interpretation of the scans, now, first of all, basically we have different types of scans which are available. Now, most common what we take into consideration probably for a refractive surgery screening, etc., is the 4-map refractive. We also have other maps such as the Berlin-Ambrosia display. Then we have the refractive map, etc. I will be covering about those also shortly. Now, firstly, talking about the 4-map refractive. Now, this is a picture of 4-map refractive pentacam scan, which mainly has got 4 scans. That is, the first is the anterior or the sagittal curvature map. Then we have the elevation map, that is a front elevation, and we have the back elevation map, and then we have the thickness map. Now, even before we go ahead with the interpretation of the scans, we should always first look at what is called QS, which is here, which is called the quality specification. Now, if it says okay, that means the scan is of a good quality and we can go ahead with interpretation. In case there are some data gaps which represents in yellow or red, that means the scan is not of a good quality and it's better to repeat it. Now, the next thing is we look at the K values. Now, here we have the blue, which is represented by the flatter K, and the red indicates the steeper K. And also, it's worthwhile at the same time to look at something called K max, which is mentioned over here. Now, the K max, again, we have a cutoff value of 47.2, and anything less than that is considered to be normal. Now, these K values are represented in this map as well, which is an anterior sagittal curvature map. Now, here we have the red, which is indicating the steeper axis, and then we have the blue, which is indicating the flatter axis. Now, in this case, basically, it's the vertical axis steeper and the horizontal is flatter. So this is a with the rule astigmatism. Now in this, again, we have to look at the superior values and the inferior value. And again, whenever we are concentrating on interpretation of these, our main concern is mainly in the 3 mm and the 5 mm zone and maximum up to 7 mm. This is where the maximum changes is what we see in the scan. So here we can see that the superior is the steeper axis than compared to the inferior. So there is some amount of superior inferior asymmetry which is seen. Now it's worthwhile to mention here also that what would be the normal difference between the inferior superior asymmetry or the superior inferior asymmetry. Now, in this case, as we see here, the superior one is more steeper than the inferior. So the difference between the superior inferior asymmetry should be lesser than 2.5. Anything more than that is considered to be abnormal. And in cases where the inferior axis is more steeper than the superior, in such cases, the difference should be lesser than 1.4 to consider it to be normal. Now, the next thing is basically I already mentioned about the Kmax. So 47.2 is what we consider as cutoff. Now, the next one is moving on to the elevation map. Now, the elevation map, as I said, this is supposed to be the anterior elevation map, and this is the posterior elevation map. Now, even before we again interpret this, it's also important to look at what is mentioned over here. This is called, So this is basically the BFS, which is the best fit sphere. So we need to look whether it's in the best fit sphere mode or the best fit toric ellipsoid, because the values in the interpretation will be different accordingly. Now, in the scan, we see it is in the best fit sphere mode. Now, first of all, to understand what exactly is this elevation map, so I think Dr. Shana has already mentioned about the best fit sphere and what are how to interpret that. So just briefly talking about the same. Now, the yellow one, what we represent here is the best fit sphere, and let's assume this triangular thing is. Let's assume the triangular thing is the cornea. So when we see what is that portion of the cornea in relation to the best fit sphere, we see that this area of the cornea is above the best fit sphere, and this will be indicated as a positive island of elevation, and which will be represented by a warmer color like red or yellow. And if we look at this portion, this is actually below the best fit sphere, and this is called as a negative ring. So the negative ring or negative island will be usually represented by cooler colors such as green and blue. So now again, when we look at this, so we have got certain values. So again, we take into consideration the 5 mm zone, which is more important. Now in this, we have got certain values which are in plus, which indicates that this is above the BFS, and certain values which are in minus, which indicates which is below the BFS. And again, there are some multiple values which are mentioned here. We need to know what are the normal values. And this again depends on whether we choose a BFS or the best fit toric ellipsoid mode. Now, if we're choosing the best fit sphere mode, we have the cutoff values here. That is, in cases of anterior, it should be lesser than or equal to 8, and posterior should be lesser than or equal to 18. Now, again, if we're interpreting a hyperopic scan, then usually the values for anterior and posterior are 7 and 28 respectively. Now, if we choose a best fit toric ellipsoid, then usually the cutoff value would be for anterior is 12 and for posterior more than 15 is considered to be abnormal. Now, just to look at this, for example, here we see that there are some values like plus 20, plus 17. And so this is a front elevation map. So these are definitely values of more than 12, which indicates that there is some amount of steepening or other elevation which is being seen abnormally on the anterior float. Now, when we talk about the elevation maps, it's also worthwhile to look at what is called as a Berlin-Ambrosio display. Now, this is a very important map, especially it helps a lot in cases of refractive surgery screening, because the type of refractive surgery that we would be choosing definitely also depends upon what is the interpretation of these scans. Now, here we have mainly the anterior elevation, and then we have the posterior elevation map. Now, we have the middle one, which is actually called as an exclusion map. This exclusion map is basically formed when about 3 millimeters around the steepest axis is being excluded, and an exaggerated map is being taken. And the third one is what is called as a difference map, which takes into consideration the difference between the two and forms a picture this way. Now, it is more important to look at this difference map. And again, there are certain values mentioned over here. If everything is in green, that means the difference is less than 5 and it's considered to be normal. Anything which is about 5 to 7 will be represented by yellow. And anything more than 7, if the difference is seen, it is represented in red. So this is definitely considered as abnormal, as in there is some amount of anterior and posterior elevation which is seen significantly. So we have to be more careful while choosing the type of refractive surgery for such patients. And also here again, it's important to look at these values where we see the DF, DB, DP, DT. And what is more important is the final D value. Now the final D value, usually we have a range of 1.5 to 3. Anything which is more than 3 is considered to be abnormal. But in the range of 1.5 to 3 is again borderline and will be represented in yellow. And less than 1.5 is considered to be normal. So the next is moving on to the pachymetric map. Now in the pachymetric map, basically this is the corneal thickness of the pachymetric map. And also we have the values of this which are mentioned over here on the left side. Now we have different things as in the pachymetry at the pupillary center, and we have pachymetry at the pachymetry at the apex. Then we have the thinnest location. Now, what is more important for us, especially for refractive surgery planning, is a thinnest pachymetry. And in this case, we see the thinnest pachymetry is 551. Now, in this map, again, it's very important to look at the values in the superior and the inferior part, especially in the 5 millimeter zone. So here we see that this is actually the 5 millimeter zone, and the superior value is 630 and inferior is 591. Now, normally the difference at this point, superior to inferior, should be lesser than 30. Anything more than 30 is again considered to be suspicious. And another thing important to look at in the pachymetric map is the y coordinate of the thinnest pachy. Now here we see that the y coordinate is minus 0.3. So any value considered less than 0.5 is considered as normal, but if it's more than 0.5, it's again suspicious, especially in cases of keratoconus, we do see values more than 0.5. Again, talking about the pachymetry, the certain information is also available about the pachymetry on the Berlin-Ambrosio display. We have something called as, this is a CTSP, which is called as a corneal thickness spatial profile. And we have the PTI, which is called as the percentage thickness increase. Now, in CTSP, we do see that there is a red, which is representing what is the patient's scan interpretation. Now, normally we see that this should be coinciding with the center line. Now, the center line is considered as a normative data, and the above one and below one are actually 2 standard deviations above and below the normative data. So the patient's scan or interpretation, which is represented in red, will usually coincide with the center line. And we usually see that it will coincide with this up to 6 millimeter. And beyond the 6 millimeter, we normally see a dip, indicating that the thickness increases from the center, and beyond 6 mm, the thickness becomes more than the central area. But if at all we see a dip early, like what is seen here, we see that the dip is seen much before 6 mm, like probably around like 3-4 mm, we see the dip. That means that the center part is much thinner in comparison with the periphery, and again, it's considered a little suspicious. And the same thing holds good for this as well. Now, the patient's data will be represented by red, which should coincide with the central data, and beyond 6 mm, there will be a dip normally seen. So this is how we see the normal, the 6 mm data, the 6 mm zone, and beyond which we see that there will be a dip in the map. Now, the next thing is also important that we need to look at certain indices over here. Now, this is basically what is called as the progression index. Now, we have the progression index minimum and the maximum, and also we have got the ART. So normally we can finally look at what is called as a ART, which is also called Ambrosio relational thickness. And each one has got a cutoff value. And if it is represented in normal, it will be usually in white. But if it is something borderline, it's in yellow. And beyond that, in the abnormal range, it goes to red. So just to mention the values, ART max, the cutoff is considered to be 339. And in case of, we also have something called ART average, where the cutoff is considered as 434. And another important thing is we have another map called as a refractive map. Now, in this refractive map, mainly we focus at these values. The rest of it is pretty much seen in the 4-map refractive as well. But here, what is more important is the center one, which are the indices. So we have multiple ones like the index of surface variance, index of vertical asymmetry, keratoconus index, etc. So these are mainly for the interpretation of keratoconus. And again, these are all, the values are already fed to the computer system, Pentacam system previously itself, and anything more than normal or in the borderline will represent itself in the form of colors like yellow and red. So this is just the values of all those indices, which will be represented as abnormal in yellow, and anything which is pathological will be represented in red. So not necessary that we have to remember these values as such, but we need to know that if something has been mentioned in red, that means it's abnormal, and we need to take a second look at it. And one more thing worthwhile to mention over here is the angle kappa. Now, we know that the angle kappa is basically the angle between the visual axis and the pupil center. Now, in OBSCAN, usually angle kappa is being mentioned directly, but in Pentacam, we do not get a direct value of angle kappa. So, but there is an indirect way of assessing. Now, when we look at this pachymetric map, we have something called as the pachymetry of the pupillary center. Now, we have to look at the x coordinate of the pupil center. And if this x coordinate is lesser than 0.2, that means to say that the angle kappa is less than 5 degrees. So anything more than 0.2 indicates that angle kappa is more than 5, though we do not know what would be the exact value, but at least roughly we'll know whether it's normal or high. Now, just we'll look at certain pathological maps. So whatever the basic interpretation that I've covered is just in the very basic that we need to know. Of course, there's a lot more to it, but these are the bare minimum that as residents or as general ophthalmologists should know to identify whether the scan is normal or it's abnormal. Now, let's look at this scan. So this is basically very, very clear that it's a case of keratoconus. Now, just to mention, when we look at this anterior sagittal curvature map, we see that there is steepening where the K values are very high. We see that it's about flatter axis is 52, steeper axis is 55, K max is 66, very steep cornea. And when we look at the anterior elevation map, we do see a very nice island in the center, which is values are higher than the normal, which indicates that this area is steeper and more elevated, and also coinciding with the posterior elevation map where the central value is again high. And these things are also coinciding with the thinnest pachy. So basically it's a typical case of severe keratoconus. Now, when we look at the same Berlin-Ambrosio display of this, we do see that there is in the exclusion map and the difference map, we do see that there is the red area indicating that there is anterior and posterior elevation significantly. And also when we look at all these D values, we see everything is represented in red, and the final D value where the cutoff is 3 is increased to 15, definitely highly abnormal. And when we look at this CTSP or the pachymetric progression map, we do see that it's definitely abnormal, and there is very much thinning which is seen in the central part. And also the same thing when we interpret this in this particular map and looking at all the indices, we see all the indices are being mentioned in red. So this is typically a case of keratoconus, and sometimes it may not be quite obvious this way, but there will be values where there will be steepening and some areas being represented in red, some in yellow. So those things are to be taken a second look and see what exactly is wrong in those particular scans. Now, next is about this pellucid marginal degeneration. Now, this is where we can see in the sagittal or curvature map, there is a typical kissing bird sign, and this is against the rule astigmatism, and a very typical bell sign, which is seen on the pachymetric map. And this will be associated with the inferior steepening, and there'll be thinning as well. Now, this is another map. Just if we grossly look at it, let's say we have got a refractive surgery planning for this patient. Now, when we grossly look at it, we do see that there is some amount of against the rule astigmatism. Anterior fluid seems to be fine, and the posterior just some small area which represents in yellow. And then we have got the pachymetry about 518. So in this case, overall, it may look okay, but when we closely look at it, we do see that the K max is actually 47.5, which is above the normal range. And when we look at this, there is a suspicious island. So it's always important to look at the elevation map more so for the posterior elevation, because that is where we need to concentrate on, especially for a refractive surgery planning. Now, let us look at the Berlin-Ambrosio display of the same map, where we'll get a better detail of this. Now, when we see this, we do see a typical this thing on the posterior elevation map represented in red. We do see the difference map on the anterior also, which is showing red. So this indicates that there is definitely an anterior and posterior elevation which is beyond what is considered normal. We do see certain values in red and yellow as well. So these cases, and the pachymetry is also a little on a lower side, and again the K value, K max, is a little on a higher side. So again, taking into consideration the patient's age and also the power, etc., we need to be more careful when we choose these patients for refractive surgery. Now, similarly, we have another patient scan wherein see there's some amount of more superior steepening compared to inferior, and the anterior one seems to be fine, but again, the posterior, we do see that there is an elevation, and in this significant elevation, which is seen on the difference map, and the derangement in the D values as well. So such patients, we need to take a second look. Now, the next one is about this is basically very typical of a post-LASIK, where we see that the central area is in blue, very good flattening seen in the center, with all the values on the lesser side being 34, 35. And also we see that the pachymetry is on the lesser side coinciding with the flattening. So this is a case of post-LASIK. And we also have another one, which is in case of post-SMILE. Again, we do see a very good central flattening over here with the K values on the lesser side and decrease in the pachy. So these are some of the basic scans and the basics of the interpretation of the Pentacam. So here I would like to end my talk. If we have any questions or inquiries, we can take it forward.
Well, doctors, just a gentle reminder that the time is 9:10, around 9:10, and we have to wind up the hall by 9:55. Please continue.
What do you, Dr. Aparna?
Yeah.
I'll just stop.
Is my screen visible?
Visible.
Okay. So, yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'll be talking on ASOCT, and I'll be focusing only on the corneal pathologies. So ASOCT is nothing but a cross-section of the cornea. It's also called as optical biopsy. It's non-invasive and can be done in the OPD itself. Initially, the scanning was done to image only the posterior segment of the eye using 830 nanometer wavelength. But then the anterior segment structures were not visible clearly. With years, they tried using 1310 nanometer, where the anterior segment structures were clearly visible. This is based on the principle of Michelson's interferometry. To know what's normal, we should know how. To know what's abnormal, we should know how a normal cornea looks like on ASOCT. The tear film is hyperreflective, the epithelium is hyporeflective, and the stroma shows variable reflectivity, and the endothelium is again hyperreflective. So we'll be discussing on various pathologies of the cornea. The first case is a hyperreflective area with the back shadowing. When we clinically correlate in this image, it is nothing but a metallic foreign body. Second case I'll discuss is on corneal edema post-cataract surgery. The most common cause for corneal edema post-cataract surgery that is non-resolving is a Descemet's membrane detachment. We have to scan the entire cornea to know the extent of the DMD and plan for any management. This is the third case showing corneal edema with some amount of epithelial bullae that is suggestive of a pseudophakic bullous keratopathy. Coming on to corneal dystrophies. This is an image showing hyperreflective areas at multiple layers on the cornea, different segments, different layers on the cornea. It involves the anterior stroma, mid stroma, as well as the posterior stroma. As you can clinically see, there are clear intervening spaces in between the lesions. This is a case of granular dystrophy. Next case, we have a very thick edematous cornea with epithelial hyperreflectivity and hypertrophy of the epithelium, with duplication of the Descemet's membrane and irregular posterior surface. This is a case of advanced Fuchs endothelial dystrophy. Next, we have a subepithelial and epithelial hyperreflectivity with localized elevation. As you can see in the clinical picture here, this is the lesion, and the surrounding epithelium appears to be healthy. This is Salzmann nodular degeneration. In this picture, you can see a hyperreflective band at the layer of Bowman's membrane. So this is nothing but calcium deposits at that level. As you can see in the clinical image, this is an early band-shaped keratopathy. Coming to infective keratitis. ASOCT is important to differentiate infiltrate from a scarring. And in infiltrate, we have to know the extent, the depth of the infiltrate, as well as the size of the infiltrate. And whenever we look for infiltrate, we have to look for other signs like corneal edema, and the margins of the infiltrate will be ill-defined. Whereas in scarring, there will be more hyperreflectivity with well-defined margins, and they'll be associated with thinning. Except in few cases of HSV, they'll be associated thickening of the cornea. The depth of scar is very important in ASOCT for surgical planning. If the scar is less than 1/3 of the cornea, we can plan for a phototherapeutic keratectomy. If it involves the deeper layers, you can plan for a dark. And if it involves the full thickness cornea, you can plan for a penetrating keratoplasty. This is an image of ASOCT showing a keratoprosthesis, where you can see the anterior plate, the posterior plate, the graft, the angle of anterior chamber. Next, coming to the ectatic disorders of the cornea. The most common ectatic disorder we come across is a keratoconus. As we can see in this image, there is localized thinning as well as apical scarring. This is suggestive of keratoconus. This image shows acute corneal hydrops. As you can clinically correlate here, there is localized severe corneal edema with intrastomal fluid clefts. We can also see the Descemet's tear with the hanging torn edges of the Descemet's membrane. Next case we have is an ASOCT picture of intacs. Here we have to look for the cross section. In intacs, the cross section is hexagonal, whereas in Kera ring, the cross section is triangular. So this is how you differentiate between the two rings. And you have to look for the depth of the ring in the follow-ups. you have to look for the surrounding corneal tissue, whether it is healthy or whether it is edematous, or if there is infiltrate, or if the ring is intruding into the anterior chamber. This has to be looked on all follow-up cases. Coming to keratoplasty. In penetrating keratoplasty, the things that you have to look for is the graft-host junction, if there is any overriding, and the important thing that you have to look for here is decimase to decimase apposition and the overall health of the graft. Coming to DSEC. In DSEC, you have to look for the graft health. In DSEC, the graft is thin in the center, thicker in the periphery, and you can see this projection into the anterior chamber. This is how the graft looks like. We have to look whether the graft is centralized. We have to look for the interface, the graft host interface. And this is how a DMEC graft looks like. So it is very thin compared to DSEC graft. There is the posterior surface is more or less like regular. In this image, we can see a dislocated DMEC graft, which is in the anterior chamber. This is how it looks like. This image is of a scleral contact lens. The importance of ASOCT in scleral contact lens fitting is you have to look for the vault. The central clearance should be 100 to 200 microns. The clearance at the limbus should be 10 to 50 microns, and the scleral landing should be adequate. So it's very important to perform ASOCT before dispensing a scleral contact lens in keratoconus. Coming to the final category, that is a refractive surgery. Here we can see a band of hyperreflectivity suggesting epithelial ingrowth post-LASIK. Another image, you can see there are multiple striae in the clinical picture. And in the scan, we can see this edematous flap with wavy configuration, suggestive of a flap striae. So it is very important for early diagnosis of all these complications and timely management in refractive surgery. So to conclude, I want to talk about 7 Ds with regards to ASOCT in corneal pathologies. First one is to determine the thickness of the cornea and corneal flaps. Second one, to know the depth of corneal lesions. Third, to know the details of corneal inflammation. To know the Descemet's membrane assessment. To look for deposits in the cornea. For example, in Wilson's disease, the Kiev ring can be identified earlier in ASOCT. In case of dry eye assessment, and also in early diagnosis of OSSN. I hope this presentation was useful for all of you, and some of the images have been taken from Spotify Eye Study Group. So it's a very good website by Dr. Shana. So I think all the exam going residents have to go through it. So I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Aparna. And that was a very nice session. Moving on, we have the final topic, which is Perfect Guide to Corneal Imaging Specular Microscopy. It's a very short topic. So what is specular microscopy? Moving on, it is used to study the qualitative and the quantitative aspect of corneal endothelial cells. The indications are preoperative in almost any intraocular surgery. Then in the other eye of a pseudophakic bullous keratopathy to see whether there's Fuchs as a risk factor, grading of donor tissue, and in diagnosis of Fuchs endothelial dystrophy as such. So let's look at a few specular scans. This is the first specular scan which we have with us here. So let's see the various parameters. The first parameter is number, which we see over here. So what is number? Number is not the count of the endothelial cells. It is simply the number of cells evaluated in the scan. So in the scan, the number of cells that were evaluated were 227. Next, we move on to is CD, which is cells density. This is the number of cells present in a 1 micrometer square of area. So 2712. So hence it is denoted as number of cells per micrometer square area. So the cell density in the scan is 2712. A healthy cell density, is more than 2000 or more than 2500. Also, it depends on the age of the patient. So this cell density is what we take as cell count, which helps us in decision making with intraocular surgeries. The next parameter is average. This is the average cell area. It is the area of each cell measured in micrometer square. It is evaluated to study the phenomenon of polymegathism, that is different cell sizes in the cornea. The next parameter we see here is standard deviation. It is the standard deviation in cell area, that is plus minus how much percentage is the difference in the area of the cells, which again is a parameter for the phenomenon of polymegathism, that is to study the different cell size. Coefficient of variation, it is the standard deviation in cell area divided by average cell area. The normal value is less than 30%, and it is the most important parameter to measure variation in cell size. A low coefficient of variation shows a uniform cell size and it is desirable. A large coefficient of variation shows a wide variation in cell sizes and it denotes polymegathism and is common in diabetic patients due to metabolic stress on the endothelium. Next parameter is the max and the min. The maximum is the largest cell, that is the area of the largest corneal endothelial cell, and the minimum is the area of the smallest corneal endothelial cell. Again, when we come over here, polymegathism column or the area column, which we've seen over here, it describes the number of cells within various area size. So each of the cells micrometer square the size, that is the 0 to 100. That means here cells of the size of 0 to 100 micrometer square are 0%. Cells of the area 100 to 200 micrometer square are 3%. Cells of the area of 200 to 300 and so on and so forth up to 900. Maximum should be distributed into 300 to 500 micrometer square column because this is the healthy size of a corneal endothelial cell. The next phenomena is the pleomorphism column. Cell shape is evaluated here to note pleomorphism, that is variety in cell shape. The cells of various shape in the cornea are round, triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon, and scallop margins. The important parameter to consider in this is hexagonality, that is 6A, a six-sided cell. A good hexagonality level is more than 50%, like here what you see is 53%. Moving on, let's interpret a few specular scans. The first specular scan that we have here is a normal specular scan. So as we discussed, the number of cells evaluated here is 227, which is okay. The cell density, that is the number of cells per millimeter square, are 2712, which is healthy. The average area of cells is 369 micrometer square. That is, most of the cells lie between the 300 to 500 in the area column. The hexagonality as seen over here is 53%, which is above 50%, and that is normal. If you see the picture of the corneal endothelial cells over here, you can see a lot of the cells are hexagonal in shape and they look uniform in size more or less with no dropout areas, that is no guttae that are visible. So this looks like a healthy corneal endothelium. Moving on, the next important spotter here is in specular microscopy is Fuchs endothelial dystrophy. The number of cells over here that were picked up for the scan are 39. So that is because there are areas of cell dropout, so very little cells are picked up for the study. The cell density is 1391 per millimeter square, which is a low count. It's less than 2000. It's even less than 1500. Then other than that, if you see, the average area of cells is 719. This is due to the large guttae or cell dropout areas. They are too evaluated erroneously as cells. These large areas that are dropped out where there are no cells, these are picked up as corneal endothelial cells by the scan due to the error in scanning, and then the largest cell area is denoted as 719. If you see in the area column over here, in the 300 to 500 group, there are very less cells. And most of the cells are larger than 900. This is because individual Gatte cell dropout areas are taken as cells, and then the area is distributed as such. The hexagonality is 38%, which is less than 50%. And here, when you see on the picture, there are huge amount of Gatte that are seen. So the diagnosis is Fuchs endothelial dystrophy. Another indication for specular microscopy is grading of donor tissue. Grading of donor tissue in cornea is done, of course, using slit lamp with all these parameters over here based on the epithelium, the stroma, and the desmase and the endothelium. After grading it on slit lamp, we do send the tissue for specular microscopy. And based on the cell count, we grade the cornea as excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor. Excellent corneas go for optical and endothelial keratoplasties, penetrating. Of course, fair corneas go for therapeutic cases or then tectonic cases. Finally, for all the spotters in my presentation, please have a look at my site, spotifystudygroup.com, and this concludes our instruction course. Thank you so much for your valuable time.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, but we're done.
We're done with the presentations. Great. Do we have any panel discussions if needed? Because we still have time, approximately 30 minutes more.
No, if anyone wants to say anything, any point? Otherwise, I think more or less we've covered most of the basics.
Just Aparna, one thing regarding the ASOCT for a scleral lens fitting, just for whoever is viewing can actually get better details about that, like how exactly do you do it? Can you just tell us a little bit about it? You're on mute.
Basically, we use a scleral lens and we try with different diameters and sizes on the patient. And the way we use is there is a plunger like thing. We use that and then we show the patient on how to use it. And then once the patient is comfortable, we make the patient wait for like 1 to 2 hours. And after that, we perform this ASOCT and look for the vault. So there shouldn't be any bubble, and then the saline that is placed in that, the vault should be adequate enough. The patient should be comfortable as well as there should be a good vault. So once the patient is comfortable and there is no tight fit and there is no congestion and as such, if it's comfortable, then we can dispense it. The central vault is very important, and the peripheral, it should be around 10 to 15 microns.
So you're doing this routinely ASOCT for all your patients before disposing?
Yeah. Yes, we do that.
Anything else, Shana, you want to talk about?
No, I think nothing else.
Okay, so as I see that we don't have anything, I think we should conclude the session over here. First of all, I would request you to please come exactly in front of your camera, smile, and that's a selfie for every one of us. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to conclude the session. Thank you so much, doctors, for such a fantastic and informative session. And I think because we have a lot of time left, we'll just keep it the way it is. Also, a request to everyone, stay hydrated and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Purnesh. Thank you, AOS, for this opportunity. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
AOS, for this opportunity. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Purnesh.